So I wanted to make some comments based on a video by legendary, I saw it this morning, by legendary video game developer Tim Kaine. He is the big guy behind Fallout 1. He also worked on Fallout 2 for the first third of its development. He was talking about how they used to have, for flights, you used to have bereavement, where if you had a relative or something bad, a tragedy had died or a tragedy happened, you would be, all the airlines, they basically charged the same. It was regulated. It was relatively inexpensive overall. And you would, if you had bereavement, you would, they would give you a flight for the cheapest available ticket for that day. If you bought, if there was only a first class seats available, you would be in first class for the cheapest fee. Eventually that got changed because people started lying. They started lying and saying, my grandma died or whatever. Airlines caught on to this. There was also very little security. It was much more personable. This has got me thinking. He also talked about his experience after he left working for, was it Interplay? I think it was Interplay. He started his company, Troika Games, and they developed a number of computer RPGs. And then he was a good employer. He paid them all basically the same, like equal pay. He gave out bonuses. He respected the employees. He treated them like human beings. And he made this YouTube video saying, hey, it doesn't seem great that, because he gets all these comments saying, oh, you did this, you went to go see this Fallout TV show preview, and you were paid to do that. Well, he was just invited, but he had to pay a lot of money to get there, and that's what brought on the conversation or the topic to begin with. And someone spoke to him and said, well, a lot of these people who are saying you were paid to do that, that's what they would do. People who say, basically he was talking about how a lot of employees can be bad too. And I'm not, and I'm very much more on the employee side myself. I understand that the power dynamic is very bad right now. But there was a change in our culture that started taking place decades ago. People started trying to game the system. Now, I don't think that's unrelated to immigration. I do think absolutely the Hart-Celler Act is a real significant factor, but that didn't become a total catastrophic flood until 1989. That's when it became a flood because of the way George H.W. Bush changed the law. It was still bad, but it was so. But I don't think it was just immigration. I think that we've experienced a sort of like indivication of our culture in the latter half of the 20th century that is not just because of immigration, but also then there's just been a decline. Part of that is a decline in Christianity, a decline in faithful Christianity that really takes sin seriously. Part of it is immigration. Part of it is probably technology and mass saturation, and a lot of it, of course, is elites who slowly became misaligned with our interest over time and things like this. But it's just, there has been this indification of our culture, like in India, where it's a screw or be screwed culture, and that is really, that's what's really happened to us, and it wasn't overnight. And I appreciate the usury discussion. I don't think that totally getting rid of interest is actually practical or possible, and I'm not entirely sure if that's what God intends for us. I do think the Old Testament is very useful for policy. I think it should be factored in, and we should think about what the Old Testament says. The Old Testament is just as much God's word as the New Testament, and I do think that they're equal. I don't think that, the Old Testament is in any fundamental way subordinated by the New Testament. But there is a very different context in the subsistence economy. But I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical of categorical prohibition of interest. Although I don't like interest. I'm not a business guy. I don't like business at all. I don't like business. I don't like sales. that was a common gallinoo. They're lovely, lovely birds. They sound like monkeys. They move a little bit like chickens. They swim. They do sort of little dances with each other. They flutter off, and you see them flapping and knocking the water around as they're skimming on just above the water. Lovely animals. I love cherubim. Like they're kind of chicken-like. They swim. They're kind of fish-like, and they sound like monkeys. And it's just kind of cool. It's cool. But yeah, basically, I think that the usury discussion, even though I'm not entirely sure that completely banning it is possible or could even allow for our economy to exist, I do think it's a good discussion that we're having here on the internet. I'm glad that capitalism is coming under review in a way that it hasn't been for a very long time, because the 20th century sort of conservatism got conflated with like fighting communism. It's like JFK was not conservative. He was liberal for his time. I mean, he's more conservative than probably most Republicans today, unfortunately, to his credit, I suppose. But his vision for America was not great. He was anti-communist, absolutely. And so anti-communism got conflated with preserving, conservatism. When conservatism is supposed to be about preserving your culture, your religion, your race, your way of life, your customs, your forms of art and music, and maybe even philosophy, things to something like that, the beauty of your land, absolutely, right? Conserving the well-being of nature, your native wildlife, your native landscapes, your waterways, your mountains, all these things are very important. And I think that what Tim Kaine was talking about, I don't think he is not a Christian. He's kind of a nice guy, one of those nice guy types, and he doesn't understand why people are so mean and so capricious and things like this. And, I wish he understood. I hope he will find Christ someday, because he's getting old. He's a great, very talented man. Yeah, I think that his experience is interesting. Like, okay, so I got distracted here. So this has turned into a ramble. I do that a lot, so forgive me. But he was a good employer, and everyone's saying that he's reacting to the extreme attacks on employers. Now, I think that these attacks are, to a significant extent, justified today, actually. But not all employers are bad. He was a good employer, and he remarked something. It's like, well, I could have made more money if I had treated my employees badly. And I feel like he said this. He said that he felt like, what was the purpose of treating the employees with respect, paying them fairly, when all he's constantly accused in the YouTube comments. I mean, these are just anons, right? Whatever. But like, and I don't know, and they're not necessarily all bad people. They're probably like themselves are in hard times, and they can't conceive of employees being good, because their experience with employees has been really bad, right? So I think that there's a feedback loop here where a lot of the commenters, some of them may just be mean jerks, but a lot of them are probably they've never experienced an employer that treated them with respect, that paid them fairly, that gave them any reasonable job security. Obviously you can screw up really badly and you will be done, but no mercy and grace, and replacing you with foreigners and things like this. Just the way that employees are treated really badly. Well, I don't know if Tim Kaine is aware of this. He may be. I think he may be slightly aware of it. I don't know. Maybe not at all, but not aware of it to the extent that he needs to be. And so you see, it's just a question. Why would he do that? Why would I treat my employee? Why should I have treated my employees well? He actually wondered that, because he's not treated with the respect that he deserves for being a good employer. So, what are the takeaways? Takeaways are that we have become a screw or be screwed culture, and that is definitely the result of things that are not our fault. But I do think that we could have been more diligent, and it wasn't just immigration. There has been a decline. There's been a decline in Christian morals, and here's the last thing I wanted to say. because the chief evils of our age. I think that because the chief evils of our age, or at least two of the most chief evils that come to mind all the time, are abortion and homosexuality, that we, and I think this is a good thing, this is why I think the usury discussion is really good, because it's making people go back to, what about fraud? What about unfairness? What about things that are unjust, that have been historically always unjust and are not novel? This stuff with abortion and homosexuality, these are novel things. And of course you have these people, a very large number of people who believe in this ideological religion of the regime, this regime religion, where it really does, like, abortion and absolute complete sexual freedom with no boundaries. These things are, like, they do amount to sacraments. They really do. Not everyone who is wishy-washy on those things treats them as a sacrament. There are people who, whatever, they're like not non-conservative grill bros or something. But there is a vast number of people who are like this. And I think that the refusal to acknowledge the utter wickedness of these things and the turning them into religious sacraments by a significant portion of the population, this has caused us to lose sight about fraud, even murder. I listened to John Doyle talking about someone who said, you did a murder. It was another incident where this guy says, you did a murder. That is like the most Reddit pathetic, like, thin-necked thing that you could say. It's like, people don't even take that. People don't take murder seriously anymore. We're desensitized to it, I think. There's so much injustice, financial injustice in particular, that has been overlooked by much of the Christian right. And really, if you're a left winger, you're really not a faithful Christian anyway. So you really have to be right wing on some level to be a true Christian. But yeah, I think we've forgotten about all these other evils because of these two specific evils that are particularly heinous have become religious sacraments, and we're too focused on that. So I'm glad to see the usury discussion and about insurance and other aspects of fraud. I think that's great. That's all I have to say. I hope you guys are having a good Monday.